quarterly update. My name is Ross Maxwell, and I'll begin with some presentation housekeeping. After the event concludes, we will post the recorded event in a downloadable slide deck on SBA's Training on Demand page. We will also send an email to everyone who has subscribed to our OFA 7A policy newsletter with a link to the recorded training on the Training on Demand site. Check the Q&A panel to find the links to subscribe. Until we can get the recorded training posted online, you can use this event's login link to watch the recorded training or forward it to others to watch. If you have any questions, we ask that you enter them in the live event Q&A. We have a team monitoring the Q&A, answering your questions as they come in. Our agenda includes Acting Associate Administrator Katie Frost. Katie will be followed by OFA discussing hot topics, and they will be followed by OPSM and OFPO discussing SBA's risk mitigation framework, and then back to OFA to go over the new SOP 5010 7.1. I'm pleased to introduce Katie Frost, our Acting Associate Administrator for SBA's Office of Capital Access. Katie joined SBA in early 2021, working as a senior advisor in the Office of the Administrator to support implementing SBA's pandemic programs, including the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program. She joined OCA officially last spring as a political deputy AA and assumed the Acting Associate Administrator role in early October. Prior to joining SBA, Katie worked in operational improvement and data analytics at the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority and as a management consultant. Katie earned an MPP from Harvard Kennedy School of Government, where she was a Belfer Fellow, and a BA in Political Science from UCLA. Katie?
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Ross, and thank you all for joining us today, this afternoon, to talk about the 7A program. And it is an exciting day. We have a new SOP that is up, and I know that the team is going to talk through the new SOP in quite a bit of detail, but I wanted to just give everyone a quick frame of reference for what this new SOP includes. And broadly speaking, the new SOP is going to add some clarity from the SOP that we released over the summer. And we're going to incorporate some of the feedback that we received directly from all of you, both in conversations over the summer and since implementation on August 1st. So more to come on today's SOP and some exciting changes and improvements that we have in that document. But before I hand it over to the team, I just want to take 5 minutes kind of at the top of the meeting here to talk about why we introduced these program changes and improvements from over the summer, and then kind of where we are in implementation and rollout. So starting with the why. Broadly speaking, we are seeking to continue improving our programs to help fill access to capital for small businesses. We had a marquee year for the 7A program last year. We did $27 billion in FY23, which is actually $2 billion more than in FY22, which is absolutely remarkable. Working in partnership with all of you, SBA brought $27 billion to the small businesses around America, which is absolutely remarkable. But we know that there are small businesses, creditworthy small businesses out there who still need help and who have trouble accessing capital. One of the best data sources on this is the Federal Reserve Survey, which shows that half of those who sought funding, half of those small businesses who sought funding in 2022 didn't get what they requested. So they either were declined or they weren't able to get all of the funding that they needed. And we've shown that with our pandemic programs and working in partnership with lenders like you, SBA has the capacity to serve millions. We know that those gaps exist, and we believe that the 7A program specifically and SBA's lending programs generally can play a significant role in helping to address that capital gap and to close it down. I think we all know the types of businesses who have the most trouble accessing traditional capital, right? It's our women-owned businesses, our businesses led by Black and Brown entrepreneurs, by immigrants, by veterans, rural businesses. And a lot of these different groups are covered well when you focus on small dollar loans. And so a lot of the changes that SBA is introducing or has introduced over summer, and some of the improvements or clarifications in the SOP that we're going to walk through today, are specifically looking at adding flexibility for small dollar loans to make those loans a little bit more accessible for the small businesses who need them. I know that most everyone on the call is familiar now with the changes that we introduced and rolled out over the summer and took live at the beginning of August. Overall, those changes were geared toward modernizing SBA's lending criteria, strengthening our network of lenders, and streamlining the process to work with SBA. And I know that we've got a lot of feedback from where we are right now, especially in that last one, streamlining the process to work with SBA. And I appreciate that feedback, and we want to encourage you all to continue providing that feedback because we are working hard toward that intent. And the team today is going to walk through where we are in greater detail, focusing on both some of the improvements that we've already introduced since 8.1, which include adding the pre-check for the risk mitigation framework, introducing Form 2518, and more. And we're also going to talk a little bit about what's next. What's next in the SOP that was just posted today, that's going to be effective in November 15th, as well as some continued opportunities for trainings, some continued improvements that SBA will continue to focus on the technology and systems side, on our process and communication side, because I know that we are committed to working with all of you to continue strengthening these programs and to continue kind of doing what we can to expand 7A lending to support small businesses everywhere across America, especially those who have the most trouble accessing traditional capital. So I'm going to hand it over to the team to kind of keep walking through this, but just wanted to thank all of you for joining today. More to come.
Up next is Dinah Seaborn, the Director of Office of Financial Assistance.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to giving us over 4,000 listeners today. We know you're all excited about the information that you received this morning, which is the update to the SOP 5010, and it is recognized and labeled as SOP 5010 7.1. As opposed to the tech update. So you will continue to see on our website 5010.7, which will be the SOP in effect from August 1st through November 14th. On the 15th of November, this new SOP 5010.7.1 will be your new SOP, and we hope to cover here today and in that SOP the changes that we've made subsequent to the rollout in August that respond to your concerns and make it easier to process and fill in some of the gaps that got created by the changes that we've made, the big and significant changes. So don't be afraid. It's not a whole new SOP. It's only an SOP with some real critical new benefits and explanations and clarity. So we will be post this conversation, obviously working with the teams and the industries in the conference era, which starts in November. And we have another training coming up in October and later this week, I guess, for 504 and various things. So you know how we are. We're going to be hot and heavy talking to you over the next few months as we get traction on these new changes. I'll be very pleased because I'm not going to have to do the waivers for construction bonds. We've reinstated that. So there's some really good things in there, but it's not a whole rewrite. It's just focused areas. And we will have that information notice out that goes through those focused areas, just the highlights, the ones that are most important and the most significant that we've heard about since the rollout. And that should be out, I guess, later this week, Ginger. Are we anticipating that to be posted probably this week?
What's that, the information notice?
Yeah, the info notice.
Yes, I saw that it was sent to the Daily this afternoon, which means we're probably 2, maybe 3 days away from being able to post it. However, well, I'll get to that on my part. So yes.
Yeah, sure. Next slide. Ross, I guess if you're the driver of the bus today. Now, I'm going to introduce our team, and you know them all very well. But before I do that, I have a little a joke to tell you because Marty said we should do 3 jokes. So I'm just going to do a little quick thing here. And so why do witches, who we are fondly aware of somebody that's a witch, why do witches not wear regular hats? Ginger, any idea? Because there's no point in it.
Oh, I was going to say because of your pointy little heads. I don't know.
And so what did the tired witch do, Ginger?
What did
She sat
do?
down for a spell, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sit down and take a back seat to Ginger and the team as they bring you along through the SOPs. I believe we have Sherry up first, and I know you guys are very anxious to hear that. So thank you, Ross. Thanks everyone for joining, and listen closely as we unroll this nice, wicked new tale for you in October.
Thanks Diana. Thank you for the dad jokes. It's a great way to start off a long, exciting call, or the witch jokes, maybe I should say. Ross, if you can go to the next slide. There you go. Okay, so as Katie and Diana have already mentioned, we're going to be covering two big topics in today's call. We're going to be going over the SOP, and we also have OPSM and OFPO to go over the process for what happens when you enter in a new application or when you want to do a pre-check. So the delay, this call was originally scheduled to occur at the beginning of October. The delay is well worth it because now we can bring all of that information to you in a very timely manner. By now, everyone should have received an email from me if you're on any of our 3 subscriber lists with the link to download the new SOP 5010 7.1. And in the body of that long email, that was just a copy and paste from the information notice that will be made public later this week. So the entire text of the information notice was in the body of the email that you should have received sometime today. And a note about those emails, yes, our email system kind of sends things out in batches and we can't control who gets them when. So I got a few panicky emails saying, hey, my friend got an email from you, but I didn't, and I know I'm subscribed. So hopefully by now everyone's received our email with the link to download the SOP. If not, it is now up on SBA's website, and you can download it directly from sba.gov. What else? We are going to be updating all of our training for SOP 5010 that's currently up on the Training on Demand page. We've already gotten a request to take it all down. We will be re-recording it all and updating it for the new SOP. And also the new SBA Form 1919, that's the borrower application form that is at OMB, and it's in there for its final approvals. We're expecting to be able to publish it sometime around mid-December, time permitting, but we're closing in on getting out that new 1919 for everyone. And of course, until we release the new 1919, please continue using the old one, even though it's expired. All right, our very own Bob Carpenter has recorded a training on the FY 2024 7A fees. As you'll recall, we released an information notice about a month or two on the fees for this coming year. No upfront or ongoing fees for loans originated in FY 2024 that are $1 million or less. That's huge, very big. So we have a training on the FY24 fees along with a downloadable slide deck for you at your convenience. The other thing we've done recently is we published an information notice and a Federal Register notice on the sunset of the Community Advantage pilot program. So we had originally been targeting a sunset date of September 31, this past September. And when we thought there was a possibility of a government shutdown, we decided to extend it by a month just to make up for any inconveniences due to a potential shutdown. So the pilot is sunsetting. However, the great news is we've onboarded a bunch of new CA lenders. I think we have a total of about 135, if I recall, CA SBLCs. These are, except for 25 or 35 new lenders, these are all former CA pilot lenders that are now permanent 7A lenders making 7A loans as CA SBLCs, plus some new ones that we're just thrilled to be bringing on board. So making great strides in that respect. And as Diana mentioned, we're having thank you, Betty. Betty says there are 142 CA SBLCs. That's Betty Hill with Oakram. Thanks, Betty, for that. We are going to be having a bonus training held by our 504 loan policy team. That's this Thursday of this week. And we've got the login link there for you, and that's going to be at 2 o'clock Eastern. And for us, if you can go to the next slide, the login link for that call is also on this slide, so that when we distribute the slide deck immediately after this call, you will have one slide with all the login links. 7A team already has all of the login links for calendar year 2024 7A Connect calls, and the 504 team will be updating their links as well. And a note on the slide deck, yes, immediately after this call, we're going to send out an email to all of the subscribers on our lists with the slide deck. So you will be having access to that right away. And of course, within a few days, we're going to be putting up the recorded version of this call and the slide deck up on SBA's Training on Demand page. Oh, Ross is hurrying me along. All right. Let's see. There are a number of ways to subscribe to our lists. Please make sure you are on our list. This is what I think of as the old school way of subscribing. You can click on one of the links up at the top of the page there in blue. But some of you have protections like spam protections, virus filters on your computers. For example, for SBA employees, those links up at the top won't work. So if those links won't work, you can send an email manually to ofa-notifications@sba.gov, and then the subject line needs to appear exactly as it appears on the slide. Or, next slide, Ross, you can sign up doing a quick response code or a QR code. And this is thanks to Ross Maxwell for doing this. All you have to do is take your phone out, take a picture of this, or act like you're taking a picture of it. Your phone will scan this and recognize this as a new email, and a new email will pop up and you can just hit send. So when you get the slide deck, if any of your friends need to sign up for 7A policy, that's the QR code for us. The next slide, Ross. This is for 504 subscriber list. Next slide. And this will get you directly to the training on demand. Okay, next. We also have some confusion or requests for help on downloading the slide deck. So I'm not going to go over these slides here, but they'll be in the slide deck for you. This walks you through how to download a slide deck from SBA's Training on Demand page. All right, and I am very happy to turn it over to Sherry McConville, Miriam Voigt, and Marty Andrews to talk about latest E-Tran updates. Guys?
Thanks, Ginger. So before we get started, I have a joke. Why do witches stay in 5-star hotels?
Why?
Because of the excellent broom service.
Hey, I knew that answer, Sherry.
Okay, so with that being said, we're going to talk a little bit about some updates to E-Tran to coincide with the SOP. Could I have the next slide, please? So effective August 1st, we made several changes. We came up with the terms and conditions for 7A that can be generated within E-Tran origination, and we also have 504 terms and conditions. We increased the credit score threshold. We increased the threshold for credit scoring to 500,000, and we made updates to the affiliation rules. We also enhanced PIMS to track all of the CA SBLCs that Ginger was talking about. In the 504 loan program, we made some modifications around the requirements for jobs created and jobs retained. That was effective on May 12th, actually. And then we brought up our fraud risk framework, which uses the STAR compliance codes. And we're going to go over that in greater detail. It has process flow impacts, and it also has APIs available for third-party vendors and lenders who are using our API services. We removed the hazard insurance requirement for loans 500 and below, and we also removed the franchise information. It's still on the screen, but we don't validate it anymore. And we also updated the credit elsewhere options to align with the SOP. Next slide, please. So the first thing I want to talk about is a new validation error. The code associated with it is 4363. Next slide, please. So what this does is this looks at individuals and entities across the entire SBA portfolio to see if there are any issues on existing loans. It checks for hold codes on other loans such as PPP or COVID EIDL. It must be resolved before you can proceed with the application. So you'll get a validation error in this case. So you'll enter your data in, you'll hit submit, and it won't go any farther. It'll stay in IP status. Excuse me. And you have to resolve this error. So how do you do this? Well, you could validate prior to submission by hitting the validate button. So you log into CABS, you find your application, and then you hit the blue little bubble at the top that says validate. Next slide, please. So now you've got this error. What do you do? Well, there's a new email box. It's 4363 resolutions@sba.gov. And I think that error message on the slide there, we're in the process of updating that so that that error message will also give you this email address. Isn't that right, Marty?
Yeah, that's right. Yep. And
right.
And we're also going to link to the third-party authorization, which we're going to talk about further down on the slide. Yeah.
Okay, so Marty,
yeah.
Go ahead. I was just going to suggest you go ahead and take the slide.
Okay, and I was going to do that. Cool. So yeah, when you send an email to the new box, please in the subject line put error 4363 along with the ETRAN application number. And if you know it, in the body of the email, in addition to requesting clearance of the validation, please include the loan number and the loan program for the loan that is causing the error, if you know it. That'll help save us time on our side from having to research and find that loan number. And some important notes: we're generally prohibited from sharing details about compliance issues on existing loans due to privacy concerns and legal obligations. To address these concerns, we've set up a process to allow you guys to use a third-party authorization form signed by the borrower, that if you submit that with the request, that allows us to provide more details than we would be able to without it. So we can give the information like what documents we're requesting from the borrower and what documents we would need to review the code, and then also a little bit more details on why a code cannot be cleared if it can't be cleared. But just want to warn you, even with that borrower authorization, there are instances where we're going to be unable to share details about the compliance issue. A couple other notes is reviewing the compliance issue can be time consuming. It often involves us obtaining documents from the borrower or from the PPP lender. And of course that takes a couple of days usually. So that, asking for your patience on these. And we have seen cases where borrowers are proactively paying off a loan, thinking that would resolve the compliance issue. That it's most times a payoff is not going to resolve the compliance issue. If a payoff will resolve the compliance issue, our team will let you know that when they're responding with the results of the review of the documentation. And again, just want to set expectations here that not all compliance issues will be able to be resolved. So there will be cases where we get the documents that we've requested, but we review them and we determine that the compliance issue cannot be resolved. And that means that the new 7A application cannot move forward.
Marty, I'd just like to add a reminder to the lenders out there. The previous slide did show you steps on how to validate your loan before you submit it for final submission. So we highly encourage the lending community to validate their loan. Don't wait for the last submit, button to validate your existing loan. Get ahead of the problems. If you have enough entities, principals within ETRAN, if you run into a 4363, it'll be easier on you if you can solve these ahead of time, or try to solve them ahead of time instead of waiting for your loan to be facing a harder close.
Yeah, that's a great point. The earlier
Hey,
the better
Marty?
in this situation.
Can
Yes.
you all please speak up? We have people on the call that aren't hearing too well, so could you please make sure you're in your microphone?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. I hope everybody can hear me. Could I have the next slide, Ross, please? So the next validation error we want to talk about is 2087. Next slide, please. So this is not a new validation. It's been there all along. The reason that you're running into it is that we had a large number, our portfolio has grown substantially. And so if you have a borrower who is defaulted on a COVID idle loan, then you're going to get this validation error, or any loan. But because we had so many COVID idle loans that are not being paid back, the chances of you coming across this are much higher. The defaulted loan must be cured by the borrower before the application can proceed. You can contact the appropriate processing center on which loan has actually defaulted. So for 7A loans, you want to contact 7A questions at SBA.gov, and for 504 loans, you want to contact 504 questions at SBA.gov. Marty?
Sure. And just some tips here to validate, similar to validating for the 4363, you would log into CAVS and select E-Tran origination, enter your app number, and hit validate. And if there's an issue with, if there's a defaulted loan, this validation would pop up. And similar to the 4363, this is a process you would want to start as early in your loan origination process as possible, because as Sherry mentioned, the default has to be cured before we can before the new application can proceed. So want to give your borrowers time to resolve that default if there is one. And again, just when you're sending that email, to help us identify and get it to the correct team members, if you could, in the subject line, title the subject error 2087 along with the E-Tran application number.
Thanks, Marty.
And then just a reminder here that if there is a default and the borrower pays it off, it's not going to update instantaneously. The payment has to process through Treasury and then update our system. So there is a several day delay. I don't know if it takes several weeks, but there definitely is a delay of several days between when the borrower sends their payment and before it reflects in our system as paid.
Thanks, Marty.
Sure.
Could we have the next slide, please? Okay, so now let's talk about the new compliance pre-check. So we listened and we heard that it would be really awesome if you guys could check for compliance codes prior to submitting the application. So we developed the ability for you to do a pre-check. The go live date of that was on the 18th of August, and it applies to any 7A or 504 loan. You should only use this feature for SBA loans. Don't use it for if you're not going to get an SBA guarantee. It's a smaller data set that is sent for the compliance check code. It's a similar concept as the pre-check for scoring, where you enter in the businesses and the principal's tax IDs and their information, and we will alert you if we have found any issues. There's no clearing of the codes at pre-checked. It's for information only. So that allows you to work with your borrowers to see if and we'll have a list of, okay, if I have this code, how do I mitigate it? What documents do I need to send to the center, et cetera, et cetera. So it gives you, like Miriam had said earlier, if you find it this early in the process, then you can work with your borrower to get the documents uploaded so that when you do submit and you get these compliance errors, you've already got all the documentation ready to go to the center, and hopefully we can get them cleared quickly. Next slide, please. So how do you do that? Well, you log into E-Tran and you go to E-Tran origination, you search for your application number, and once you're on your app, there'll be a blue button that says pre-check compliance, and you just click that. And again, you can't clear these codes. It's just going to tell you this is what we found for the entities that you've entered on this application. Next slide, please. So here's a high level flow. The lender, does the pre-check, and then the status now will be in compliance review. Oh, wait, this is, lender clicks the pre-check compliance. Oh, that's optional. Okay, so once the loan has been submitted, he may or may not have done the pre-check. He submits the application. It goes into in compliance review every day at 4 p.m. We run it through the our fraud risk framework, which now has a new name, risk mitigation framework. At 4 p.m., we take every application that's been submitted and we run this through Treasury's do not pay, and also our own compliance check tool that checks against LexisNexis. If a code is issued, then the application will be reverted to in process, and it'll say that it failed pre-check. If there were no codes, then it'll just say the application's in process, and then the lender can formally submit the application. Again, pre-checks cannot be cleared. They're information only. If you don't need the loan will, when you submit it, the loan will go back through pre-check again, but this time it'll follow it'll go back through compliance check again, not pre-check, and it will either be put in, it'll either get funded if it passes, and there'll be another slide there, or it will be withdrawn because it failed compliance check. Could I have the next slide? So this is, I want to talk a little bit about our framework here. So this applies to all 7A and 504 loan guarantee products. It's part of the new SOP release. We're checking against Treasury do not pay. We're checking against the history of compliance. Those were the validations that you saw earlier. We're also going and doing a LexisNexis evaluation of business and principles. We're checking credit scores. And this is the same process that we used in PPP round 3, which we found highly successful. Next slide, please. And so this is the process for that. It's very similar to the pre-check, except again, at 4 p.m., we're going to send it through STAR, do not pay. If there's no code, then it continues through the normal process, which either gets funded or gets sent to the sender if it's non-delegated. If there is a code, then the status becomes withdrawn, failed compliance, and the lender can work with the applicant and the centers to try to clear the codes. If a vendor has submitted it through a vendor product, then at 9 a.m. the following day, they can come back through an API and check on the status. Okay, Marty, you want to take this one? Or do you want me to?
Sure. Yeah, I can take it. Yeah, so this slide goes over how to check for codes within E-Tran. So if your file after the compliance check is showing a status of withdrawn, you can follow these 4 steps to determine what the compliance check is and obtain some details about the compliance check. So you would log into E-Tran origination and pull up your application. Click on the menu labeled application info on the left-hand navigation side. Scroll to the bottom of the page and there'll be a gray box where labeled compliance codes. And there'll be on the right of that box, on the right-hand side, there'll be a hyperlink that says details, and you can click on that, and that will provide you a little bit more information about which person or entity on the application record alerted and what the alert alerted for. Before you proceed here, this is important here is check the accuracy of your data. So if there's any typos in any of the tax IDs or borrower names or principal guarantor names, we need you guys to correct those and resubmit a new application with the corrected data. We can't clear alerts for applications with inaccurate data. This is, this whole process is based on accuracy of data, and so that's an important step here, especially with the mismatch of TIN or mismatch of name alerts. And then if after you've done that, if you've confirmed that all the information was input correctly, you can send a request to SBA to clear the compliance code, and we'll go over that process on the next slide. So each code has a different set of instructions or documents that we'll be looking for, and we list those on some of the later slides here. You would upload. Can we go back to the? Yeah, thank you. To start the process, upload the supporting documents via the documents bubble in eTran origination under the compliance support documents. After those documents have been uploaded, send an email to the center. In this case, it'd be the 7A center, 7A compliance check at sba.gov to request clearance of the hold code and let us know that documents will be uploaded. In the subject line, we're asking that you put in compliance code resolution along with the eTran application number to help us route it to our team quicker. And the next several slides list our most common compliance checks codes and the documents to resolve. So this could help you kind of proactively identify what documents you might need to submit for each specific code. If you don't have this list will be posted, but if you don't have it handy when you're processing your loan, or if you upload the wrong doc, our center will tell you which document is needed for the specific alert. I'm not going to go through all these, but this will be posted kind of as a reference for you guys.
So this was the document that I was referring to. So when you do a pre-check, you can refer to this document as to what documentation you want to get from your applicant so that these can be hopefully resolved. So now we want to talk about the 7A terms and conditions. So the loan authorization, can we have the next slide, please? So the terms and condition was implemented in eTran origination. It replaces the loan authorization. There's a data entry guide that is available under the little question mark in eTran. Also, there is on the front page under news, there's a link to it as well on the CAS landing page. That will tell you how to map what fields map on the eTran application to this terms and conditions. It's only available in origination. We are working on having it available in servicing, but that is not available yet. Next slide, please. This is just a copy of it. The document button and the generation are only available in origination, like I said, in the following statuses: application in process, if the application is awaiting documents, or if it's been funded. If the loan has a status of R1, it can't be edited, nor can you generate a terms and conditions sheet. Post-approval changes, any changes made in eTran servicing will not be reflected in the terms and conditions. Changes or corrections need to be post-approval to follow the normal loan mod. Changes and corrections needed after approval will follow the normal loan mod process. Next slide, please.
Sherry, if I can add a comment to the previous page, Ross?
Sure.
Thank you. Just a reminder for the lending community out there is that when you're doing your data entry into the origination module of eTran, please make sure that your data entry reflects your file. That's what your file is supposed to be. We're having to field a lot of emails recently where lenders are wanting to switch out the principals, guarantors, or adding new companies. So, whereas you do have the ability to do that in servicing, your file that you submit to SBA for approval should be as close as, the structure should be as close as possible to what you plan for it to be funded at. So this is just a reminder, to please make sure your data entry is done properly within origination so that you're not having to make all these edits and additions to the file at the servicing level. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Miriam.
Miriam.
And this is Diana. Let me just mention one thing. This is a reminder to lenders new and old, and that is you should not be submitting a loan into the system for a loan number if you haven't identified thoroughly who your borrower is. Understanding that there are sometimes changes in, percentage ownership or a new investor, et cetera, but it's not a good thing, especially not now that we've automated a lot of these checks and eligibility issues up front, to send it in early to get a loan number. The best thing to do is know your customer before you submit to E-Tran. So to Miriam's point, it's going to slow the system down. It's going to slow you down. Don't submit loans that you don't really have a commitment and a firm project with owners and dollars on into the system. You can pre-check, but you really shouldn't be submitting a loan in there unless it's ready to be approved by SBA and has been approved by your lending institution. Thanks.
Thanks, Diana. And so now we have our final slide has some cheat sheets that, can we go ahead and to the next slide? So these are I know we rattled off a whole lot of email addresses, so this will show you what email address you should be using to clear compliance check codes. If you have validation questions, or if you're trying to, there's a different mailbox now for 4363, and then all other validations would go to 7A questions or 504 questions. So that's a little matrix for who you should contact, which email box you should email for compliance check. Next slide. And then this is just like a little cheat sheet that talks about the different statuses. So we mentioned a whole bunch of statuses. We've added some new statuses. We now, instead of just having one application in process, we have application in process regular, which means you haven't submitted it, and application in process that failed pre-check. The same thing with withdrawn. Did the lender withdraw it or did it fail compliance? And then we've also added the in compliance review status, and there's more information on the right side that gives you some tips. So next slide, I think that's the last slide. So I did have one other joke because, that's how we roll. So if you know OPSM, then you'll appreciate this. What is the difference between a homeless clown and a scary clown? Have any idea, Diana?
No, I'm not a clown expert, Sherry, so you got me there.
One is penniless and the other is penny wise.
Oh, that's a good one.
Wow.
Thank you all.
So Sherry, Miriam, and Marty, thank you for your time. We have more than 100 questions on the topics you covered, as well as some eager beavers who are pre-submitting questions about the SOP. Do you think you guys can stick around and answer some of these questions in writing? Do you know how to do that? Would you like us to read some of them to you? What's your preference?
And this is Evan here. I've been answering a couple in writing as we go through, so I'll be on for a while. I don't know about Miriam and Sherry.
Evan,
right.
you are awesome. Thank you very much. So Evan's gonna take a shot at this. If he has any questions or if some don't get answered, we can follow up.
Can we take just maybe the top 3 or 4? Because some of them are real big repeaters. Can we take a couple of them? Marty, can you stay on if Sherry has to go?
I don't have to go until
Okay.
I got a couple minutes. So what do you want to take? What's the question?
Let's see, I'm looking at some of the published ones that have the most thumbs up. So with the compliance check running Cavers and SAM, are we still required to have documentation that we run this check ourselves as lender? So is the compliance checking Cavers and SAM for all the pertinent parties? That's the first question.
Okay, so we're going against do not pay. We will have access to the Cavers and the SAM restricted data sources in the next 17 days. So for now, continue to check, and then we will tell you when we've expanded.
Okay.
I'd just like to add to something for that question. Having been on the other side as a lender, you know, before you submit your file to SBA, wouldn't you want to know if your borrower was in KVARS or the SAM databases? I would assume so, because you don't want to waste all that energy in working on a file and then have it not be eligible. So just throwing that out there for consideration.
Can you guys address the 4363 code? I believe you already did in your presentation, but not all of the 4363 codes can be cleared, right, guys?
That's correct.
Correct.
Yeah, and is there a way that the lender, how will we know that? Or are we still working on that?
Our team will tell the lender, you know, after we get the documents and review them, we will provide a response that either, you know, the code has been resolved or that the code cannot be resolved. I guess there's a third option that we need, you know, either we might need different documents or maybe the documents we requested weren't submitted. But the two final ones would be that either it's resolved or it you know, it couldn't be resolved. If the request comes in with that third-party authorization, we are providing a little more details on why it can't be resolved, or we are still working through some of the privacy and legal concerns with OGC to hopefully provide more details than we currently are. But I guess the short answer is we would provide a response to the lender, letting them know whether the code can be resolved or not.
And that, can you give the form number on that again, Marty? Was it?
2518. And there's a link in this presentation that if you click that link, that'll bring you right to the form.
Thank you.
And,
Thank
Can
you.
you DocuSign that
needs,
form? Marty, can you DocuSign that? Okay, great.
Yeah, and it needs to be signed by the borrower that had the previous loan. Yep.
Okay.
Somebody's saying here that the 2518 references a loan number. And if they can't get through the compliance check, there's not going to be a loan number. Can you still talk to the lender even if that form doesn't have a loan number on it?
It should list the loan number of the existing loan. So the loan with the compliance, or with the with the compliance issue.
So for example, if they're trying to make a new 7A loan and the issue is with an idle loan, you should list the idle loan numbers. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
How about the guarantee fee calculator, Ginger? I've seen several questions on there. Is that something that was posted that they could use to calculate previously and it's not updated for 2024? Is that something, Sherry, that's in the system?
That's something that our world famous LGPC does. And that team I don't think is on the call right now, but I did send a private reply to that one person saying we'll ask them if they could update that.
We'll work on that. Thank you.
Sherry, are lenders getting an email letting them know if there's a pass-fail on the compliance check? They say right now the only way that they can think of is to regularly check CAVs.
That's the guidance that we've given them, is to regularly check CAVs. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Diana, somebody's asking, can you give an example of a compliance issue that will not be able to be resolved and why you can't tell the lender? Assume we have assigned 2518.
Yeah, that's a question for Marty and them. I can't help you
Well,
there.
we can't tell you.
Okay.
So let me say generally, if you get that kind of a code for your client, you have to do some digging with them. There's a problem. It means there's a pretty serious problem. So it's typically, you know, problems with an existing loan, default, you know, charge off, legal issues with the DOJ and others. So there's a wide variety of things, but you have to understand that it's a good tip off to you that there's something really seriously wrong. It's going to require a hard conversation with your borrower, but it's likely they understand, even though they like not to admit to it. They understand that they have a problem somewhere that's pretty serious. If they're under investigation, Usually they know they're under investigation. So there's, there's multitude of things that fall under 4363 are a message to the lender that there's a serious issue. And we are not always legally authorized to say anything beyond that, this is a problem that can't be resolved.
I see a request for updates to ETRAN asking if it can be updated to make entering liens on all business assets easier. Right now, you can only choose specifics such as inventory or equipment. So maybe that's something we can look at for a future day. Evan, of the ones that you've responded to, are there any that you want to verbalize here?
Yeah, well, I'll just say generally, there's a couple that I think are referencing some specific issues that people are having. So it'd be a good time to remind you that if you have a loan issue that appears to be system related, you can use the CAVS questions box. So it's CAVS questions at SBA.gov for that specific loan issue. And then the team will take a look to see if there's anything we need to handle on our end.
What should somebody in the field, one of our field offices, do if a borrower shows up to a district office to try to resolve a compliance code issue?
So we've been receiving some borrower emails into that mailbox, and that mailbox was set up for the lending community, not for the borrowers or applicants trying to get a loan. So I would encourage the field offices to have the borrower work with their lending partners who do have access to ETRAN, and they do have access to the mailbox so that we can work with them.
Good answer. All right, Evan, and would love it if you guys could stick around and continue providing written response to some of these questions to help out the folks who are sending them in. But why don't we pivot now to the new SOP 5010 7.1. As we've already announced, it goes into effect November 15th, 2023. So in about 3 weeks from now. And with us today to go over it are Randy Puckett and Ross Maxwell. And of course, Diana and I will be interjecting frequently with our own comments. So Randy and Ross, take it away.
Thank you very much, Ginger. Okay, so first off, we're going to start out with Section A for the core requirements for all 7A and 504 loans and the significant updates to that section. Starting out, we want to point out here in Chapter 1, the title change. So the title is now Primary Applicant Eligibility Requirements, certified by the applicant, and validated by SBA's Risk Mitigation Framework. And you heard that term in the previous presentation, but we want to point out here that you'll see that throughout the SOP and a lot in Chapter 1. So SBA will make the final determination as to the eligibility of the applicant for all eligibility requirements using SBA's Risk Mitigation Framework. And here we've listed some of those eligibility requirements, such as business located in the United States, is organized for profit, is small in accordance with SBA's size standards, and is not one of the types of ineligible businesses listed in Federal Regulation 13 CFR Section 120.110. Also, in the previous presentation, they went over it pretty well, but in the SOP, this is new, that the lenders may conduct a pre-check in ETRAN before submitting the loan application. So to determine whether there's the SBA Risk Mitigation Framework, it'll flag, and then if there's any eligibility issues for the applicant, you can do that prior to submitting the application, which again is what they just went over. Also, lenders must not submit, an application that they know is not eligible. So if the applicant certifies but you as a lender know that it's not eligible, you shouldn't submit the application. Next slide. For the EPC and OC relationship, we've clarified that those loans in that structure, that only the OC is examined for size and affiliation. There's been a lot of questions around this, but in accordance with 13 CFR section 120.151, the amount of any loan received by an EPC applies to the loan limit of both the EPC and the OC. So we just want to make sure that that's clear. We've had a lot of questions about that. On affiliation, based on ownership, this first bullet here it's not new. When spouses and minor children jointly own a business, their ownership interest is combined when determining the amount of ownership. But if the ownership interest is not combined, when spouses and minor children have individual ownership interest in different business. So, for example, if my spouse and I own 30% each of a particular, of one business and another, then those are going to be combined. But if I own 100% of one business and she owns 100% of a different business, those are not combined. Next slide. So for credit not available elsewhere, we've clarified requirements for documenting credit not available elsewhere. So there's no requirement for written justification in the credit memo beyond simply indicating or checking a box of one or more reasons from a list of the acceptable factors. And then if you select other, you must list the reason. So this next one here is that there's a new paragraph C in chapter 2, but the information is not new. It was just relocated from chapter 1. Relocated. Yeah, it was in chapter 1. It's been relocated to chapter 2, and these are the responsibility of the lender. So a lot of the pre-check and the risk mitigation framework that will check a lot of the eligibility, these are the lender's responsibility. Next slide. So the occupancy and leasing requirements, we've added clarifying text for the occupancy requirements only apply when loan proceeds are used to purchase or improve real estate, or when debt secured by real estate is financed with loan proceeds. And then also rentable property is the total square footage of all buildings and facilities used for business operations. And that includes common areas, but it excludes stairways, elevators, and mechanical areas. The added borrower responsibilities when leasing space, we've added that information into the SOP. So there's this is just a summary of some of the information that was added back in for that, which is the minimum lease term, the assignment of lease and landlord waiver should be obtained, and then ground lease terms. So for service and packaging fees, we recognize, this slide is probably very important to many of you on this call. So we'll go over some of the important points here and would turn your attention to the SOP itself as well. But for servicing and packaging fees, the lender can charge reasonable fees for servicing and packaging, but that are customary for similar lenders in that geographic area. So lenders may advise the applicant in writing that the applicant is not required to obtain or pay for unwanted services, and made very clear here that the lender may charge a flat fee of up to $2,500. So for those fees need to be reported in ETRAN, and for any fees over $2,500, they need to be done on Form 159. For technology service fees, the technology service fees previously, when 5010-7 was issued, the lender could have them either in out-of-pocket expense or in servicing and packaging fees. And so this has been clarified here. So lenders may charge fees associated with technology, and that's whether they're developed internally or purchased through a third party. And that's on a pro rata basis for software technology used in connection with preparing SBA loan documents, underwriting, closing SBA guaranteed loans. But these fees, and this is one we want to point out here, is they may not be charged as an out-of-pocket expense. This is what we've clarified here. They're considered service and packaging fees. In Chapter 5, for guarantees, this has been an area of a lot of conversation that we've had over the past several months regarding the 6-month look back and the partial change of ownership and some of the challenges with that. So what we've done is the paragraph A4 under reducing ownership interest, this paragraph's been deleted because it was causing the confusion and a lot of the questions. So even though that paragraph was deleted, SBA does intend that for SBA loans for complete changes of ownership, the seller is not required to provide a guarantee because they're no longer an owner in the business. Makes sense. But for partial changes of ownership, and this is highlighted for clarity, percentage of ownership is measured post-sale. So for verification of financial information, we again have had a lot of questions about this. So the section was rewritten for clarity and flow. But specifically to point out here, 7A loans 500,000 or less is do what you do. But prior to the first disbursement, the lender must obtain either a tax transcript or business tax returns, and that is to verify the applicant's size.
And Randy, let me just interject here. I can tell by the some of the questions we're getting that we have some newer lenders to SBA lending. So I believe this is the first place in the presentation where we use the phrase "do what you do." And I'd like to pause here just to explain what we mean when we say do what you do. Do what you do is just a shorthand phrase that we use when we're referencing that the lender should apply the same policies and procedures to their SBA guaranteed loans and loan applications that they use for processing and approving their similarly sized non-SBA guaranteed commercial loans. So that's quite a mouthful, and we tend not to say it exactly the same way every time. So to shorten that, we say, do what you do. And then the next question we always get after we explain what we mean by do what you do, the next question is always, well, what about the non-regulated lenders? Well, SOP 5056, which used to be part 1 of SOP 5010, explains that non-regulated lenders, when they're applying to SBA to become a new 7A lender, they have to provide all of their policies and procedures to SBA for review. And when those non-regulated lenders are approving an SBA loan, they must use the procedures that have been reviewed by SBA. And so for a non-regulated lender, when we use the phrase do what you do, they are applying the same policies and procedures that were reviewed by SBA. All right, thanks, Randy.
Thanks, Ginger. Appreciate that very much. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to go through this thoroughly. Bear with me as I read it to you, because that's what I'm going to do. I want to make sure I cover all of these points clearly. But in Chapter 5, there's been a new section added here. It's called substitution of personal and or corporate guarantee liability. And that is now permitted. And so what that means is that third-party individuals or entities may assume the liability of a guarantee for individuals and or entities that would otherwise be required to make a personal or corporate guarantee for an SBA loan. Substitute guarantor must have a similar or greater value, and personal corporate guarantee liability agreement or transfer agreement must be submitted to the lender as part of the complete loan package. And if a substitute guarantor will be used, the lenders must identify in the E-Tran terms and conditions both the substitute guarantor and the individual or corporate entity being substituted. This is new.
All right, hold up there, Randy. Go back, because
Yep.
this is a wicked little topic. So let's talk about that, because historically we only permitted the substitution of a guarantor in servicing. So once a loan was made, right? This is a difference. And so what the program acknowledges is that there may be another guarantor other than a required guarantor who brings to the table the same or greater assets and value. So let's think a little bit about a brand new business, and the father has great history in the business, and the daughter or son is the owner, and the father is willing to guarantee the loan, and the father obviously is the source of experience. So what we're saying here is that might be a better guarantor, but it doesn't remove your option for taking the guarantee of both. That's a decision for the lender to make, and Ginger, can you?
Diana, for me, it sounds like your sound is cutting out. I don't know if everybody else is hearing the same thing.
Yeah, I'm getting that too.
Yeah. So Diana, I'll get you an email with a call-in number if you want to use your phone to call in. All right. Check your work email.
If you get back on, we can jump back if you want to discuss that a little bit more too. Thank you for elaborating on that, Diana. We'll move on to the next slide. Again, we'll jump back if we need to. So we've had questions about this today on the chat. We've had a lot of questions from a lot of folks about this particular topic. So what we want to clarify here, there's been clarifying text added, and if the lender is not taking the business real estate as collateral, we want to be clear here on this. If the business is not taking the business real estate as collateral, flood insurance is not required, full stop. But if they are, so this is where this comes in. If the lender is taking the business real estate as collateral, and if it is in a special flood hazard area, and if the loan proceeds are being used to refinance, acquire, install, improve, construct, or renovate real estate and or machinery equipment, then the loan recipient must obtain flood insurance on the collateral and its contents. So this is where we've had a lot of questions from folks, whether just the contents have to be covered, or so hopefully this clarifies that for you, that it's when commercial real estate is part of the transaction and it's in a special flood hazard area and the proceeds are being used for those purposes, and then private flood insurance is accepted, but it needs to meet the same requirements as the standard NFIP policy.
Hey, Randy, I'm back.
Awesome. Did you
On
want
the
to jump
flood
back to that?
insurance. Nope, you're good here. I think everybody
Okay.
got the message, and I was properly censored or whatever. With regard to the flood insurance, the simple, in my mind, translation of this is if you're doing an equipment, leasehold or furniture and fixtures working capital loan, and you're not taking the real estate, you do not have to have flood insurance. So if it's a personal asset acquisition or refinance, no real estate, no flood insurance, right? So that's a good change, and hopefully that's clear now.
And the flip side of that we also get a lot of questions on is regarding contents insurance. So the only time you have to get contents insurance is if you are otherwise required to get flood insurance because of the real estate collateral. Then you have to get contents insurance. All right, let's keep this train rolling.
Great. So this one is not new. Many of you should be familiar with this already, but it's been pointed out here in the SOP, in SOP 5010.7.1, and that is that SBA lending programs qualify as special purpose credit programs under Equal Credit Opportunity Act. And that allows, in certain situations, that the applicant's marital status, the source of income, alimony, and child support, spousal financial resources, they can be obtained and considered when determining program eligibility. And then also the SBA or lender has the right to obtain the signature of the applicant's spouse, whether they're an owner or not, depending on the credit instrument, if it's required by federal or state law. Okay, so we just went through all of Section A, and now we're going to move on to Section B, which is 7A loan program specific requirements.
And Randy, just to clarify, everything we just discussed in Section A impacts all types of 7A loans, and it also impacts the 504 loan program. So for example, the new ability to obtain a substitute guarantor, that's available in 7A and in 504. So everything in Section A, we call that the core, and it applies to both loan programs. But then Section B is only applicable to the 7A loan program. And you'll see as Randy goes through these slides that some things only apply to standard 7A loans, other things only apply to 7A small and SBA Express. And Randy will clarify what he means when he's talking about the topic. Thanks, Randy.
Thanks, Ginger. For the next few slides, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ross Maxwell.
Thanks, Randy. Just real quick here on 7A loan maturities. So if you're using the loan proceeds for a mixture of different purposes like buying land, covering working capital, getting machinery, or refinancing any of these, the loan maturity timeframes can vary. But it's important to understand that if 51% of the loan proceeds is for the new purchase of real estate, you could have a maximum of a 25-year maturity period. It's not half, not more than half. The threshold here is 51% for that 25-year term. Now, for all delivery methods.
Ross, give us a minute here. Go ahead, Ginger.
I was going to say, we know that this is a hot topic, so we want to make sure you know that for 7A loans, if it's a mixed purpose loan and the uses of proceeds are 51% or more for real estate, the loan term can be 25 years. Diana, did you want to add on there? Or did you want to give another witch joke?
Yeah, no more jokes. Fun time's over. We're in serious business here. No, what I want to say is I know that a lot of the loans that have been made in the last 60 days, this created an issue for them. And obviously, if you're a delegated lender, you have the opportunity to make some modifications here. So if it was your intent originally to allow the 25 years and you have the 51% or more for the use of proceeds on real estate, we would expect that to be corrected in a loan modification. That's if the loan is not funded, and then however you might change that under servicing and Marty's team, once the loan is made, we have no objection to providing that maturity if it qualifies under this 51% or more as a loan modification at this point based on the new rule, and that would be effective when November 15th. That's when the effective date of these changes are.
November 15th, although what they can do post dispersal may vary depending on whether the loan's in the secondary market. Is that correct?
Always, yes, subject to
Yeah.
restrictions of secondary market.
Yep.
So for all delivery methods, well, no, sorry about that. Yeah, for all delivery methods, equipment, fixtures, or furniture loans should not exceed 10 years. Now, the term may be up to 15 years if the IRS asset class useful life supports the term. Now, you can find a link to the publication here. It's IRS publication 946. Now, this is an IRS document. It's called a guide to depreciation. I'll give you a little hint. The tables that you're looking for that we're referencing are on page 97 of that publication. And loans for leasehold improvements, except for leasehold interest in land, may not exceed 10 years, plus an additional period reasonably necessary to complete the improvements, but in no case, no more than 12 months. So when it comes to a complete change of ownership, you've got a 10-year maximum maturity period. But if the purchase price includes the commercial real estate where the business is based, and that real estate makes up 51% or more of the purchase price, you could potentially have a term for up to 25 years. Now let's talk about a complete partner buyout or a partial change in ownership. Now these transactions usually involve buying or selling stock in the business, which means your loan maturity is capped at 10 years. And if you're going for a partial change in ownership, the person selling can still stay on as an owner, officer, director, stockholder, key employee, or just work for the business. Do you have anything to add?
Keep it rolling.
Seller earnouts are prohibited. However, buyer rebates based on business performance are allowed. Now, this is because it's a benefit to the borrower. Now, if the borrower receives funds based on the rebate, it should be first applied to pay down the 7A loan to a point where it will not trigger a subsidy recoupment fee. Any remaining funds may be used for business purposes. The maximum 7A loan uses of proceeds for any change of ownership is capped at its business valuation amount. Now, when the business valuation is lower than the sales agreement, the shortfall may be financed with a non-guaranteed loan, just so long as it's subordinate to the 7A loan. Now I'll hand it back over to Randy.
Thank you, Ross. So we're going to talk about debt refinance over the next few slides, and you could just really pay attention to these two bullets because you're going to see reminders of them in the next two slides as well. So this first one is really important. It was in the SOP before, but kind of scattered about throughout the SOP, but it's been very clear that for standard 7A, 7A small, and SBA Express for debt refinance, it needs to be current. The debt being refinanced needs to be current. And what that means is that the debt to be refinanced must be or have been current for at least the last 12 months or for the life of the loan, whichever is less. This next one is regarding delegated authority. In accordance with the Federal Regulation 13 CFR Section 120.452, a lender may not use PLP delegated authority to reduce the lender's credit exposure to the applicant. You'll notice in that it's the PLP delegated authority. So for standard 7A and 7A small loans, that reduce a lender's credit exposure to the applicant, they must be processed under non-delegated authority. So you can process it, it just will have to be done under non-delegated authority. And that also applies to all other delivery methods that use the PLP delegated authority. However, you see that bolded here, SBA Express lenders may process loans that reduce the SBA Express lenders' credit exposure to the applicant under SBA Express Authority, and that's because SBA Express Authority is a different authority than POP delegated authority. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So refinancing same institution or another lender's SBA guaranteed debt, either delegated or non-delegated authority, for 7A loans needs to meet the 10% improvement rule, and any subsidy recoupment fees need to be included in the 10% improvement calculation. For 504 loans, when refinancing 504 loans of 7A, it's the new loan needs to meet also the 10% improvement to installment payment requirement. The lender needs to include justification in the credit memo. The 504 prepayment penalties will apply, and it can't solely refinance a third party lender's loan. And again, just to reiterate, the calculation of the 10% improvement includes the subsidy recoupment fees and prepayment penalties. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, you see here the reminder of the 2 points we just talked about, which is, the lenders may not use POP authority. They can POP authority reduce the lender's credit exposure to the applicant, and that must meet currency requirement. So refinancing same institution, non-SBA guaranteed debt. The new loan needs to meet the SBA 10% improvement requirement. And then the reminders again, as mentioned earlier, these are important, which is why you see these reminders on each slide. And then that last bullet, the prepayment penalties must be included in 10% improvement calculation. Okay, so for maximum 7A maximum loan amounts, and this is for 7A small and SBA express. The 7A small loans, the maximum loan amount of $500,000 per project. Now, that statement per project is highlighted very intentionally, as you can imagine, because it is per project, and that includes other 7A loans made within 90 days. So if there's a loan outstanding for $400,000 and another loan is made under 90 days for $100,000, and they've hit that $500,000 per project within that 90 days. But if they make a $400,000 loan and then on day 91 make another $500,000 loan, they can do that because it's per project. But for SBA Express, the maximum aggregate loan amount is $500,000 gross. So that's inclusive of all SBA Express and 7A pilot program loans. Now we're going to talk about equity requirements. Now this is for standard 7A only for complete changes of ownership. This is the only request type that requires a 10% equity injection for the total project cost. And that's all costs required to complete the change of ownership, and that's regardless of the source of funds. So the seller debt can be considered as part of the equity injection if, and this is new, the seller's loan does not include a balloon payment. And for the next 24 months of the 7A loan, either it's on full standby for that 24 months, or it's on partial standby, which is interest-only payments being made. And the applicant's business cash flow, their historical cash flow, supports the payment, the partial, the interest-only payments. And at least a quarter of the SBA required equity injection is from a source other than the seller. Again, for standard 7A only, this is for changes of ownership between existing owners or complete partner buyout or partial changes of ownership. So this doesn't have a 10% equity requirement. It's got a 9-to-1 debt to worth ratio requirement if you're financing more than 90% of the change of ownership. So if cash is required, it can either be an amount sufficient to reflect the debt to worth ratio of no greater than 9:1 on the pro forma balance sheet, or in the amount of at least 10% of the purchase price of the business as reflected in the purchase and sales agreement. And that is whichever is less. So underwriting 7A small loans, and when the applicant receives an acceptable SBSS score, this is for non-delegated authority, the lender submits the application via E-Tran, and then once SBA issues the SBA loan number, they can close and disperse the loan. And for delegated authority, it's the same. It's once the SBA issues the SBA loan number, they can close and disperse the loan. But for applicants that do not receive an acceptable SBSS score, processes are different. So for non-delegated authority, lenders may submit the application via E-Tran for processing. The lender's credit memo needs to contain a cash flow analysis that demonstrates the applicant's ability to repay the loan through the cash flow of the business. The cash flow analysis needs to include all business debt, including the new 7A loan. And then once SBA issues the loan number, they can close and disperse the loans in accordance with the procedures in the SOP. Now, for applicants, when applicant does not receive an SBSS score, an acceptable SBSS score, under delegated authority, there are three options. So the lender that has PLP authority may override an unacceptable SBSS score. And option one is they can complete a cash flow analysis that demonstrates their reasonable reassurance of repayment. And that would include the lenders must document the cash flow analysis in their loan file. Cash flow analysis needs to include all the debts, including the new 7A loan. And then SBA will not, this is an important point here, SBA is not going to deny the lender's request for loan guarantee based only on the fact that lender made the decision to use its PLP authority to underwrite the loan via cash flow of the business. And then option number two under PLP authority is use the lender's business credit scoring model that has been reviewed by SBA. And then the third option here is that lenders with SBA Express authority may approve the loan as an SBA Express loan. Okay, for collateral, and this is for all 7A loan delivery methods. Regarding lender preference, this language didn't go away. It wasn't included in 5010-7. However, it was still in SOP 5056-1. So this language has just been added to the SOP 5010-7.1, and that is lender preference and federal regulations.
Ross, I think you just you got to go back to the presentation there, buddy. Ross?
Did we lose him?
Hang tight, guys. We're just trying to get the slide deck back up. Ross, you with us?
Oh yeah, I'm getting it back up.
All right. Hang on, guys. Who's got another witch joke? What's the first thing a young witch learns how to do? She learns to spell. All right. Good job. All right, Randy, keep on going.
All right. So we were on the collateral section. I think slide 73. There we go. Thank you. So in Federal Regulation 13 CFR Section 120.411, it talks about prohibiting lenders from taking any action in connection with an SBA guaranteed loan that establishes a preference in favor of the lender. So again, lender preference, and that includes the piggyback structure. So for 7A small loans and SBA Express, and again, this is collateral, for loans over 50,000, collateral policies are do what you do, and Ginger did a great job explaining what that is. And so for collateral policies, again, for loans over 50,000, it's do what you do, except that SBA does not require a lender to place a lien on non-business assets, such as a home, personal home, even if it's a lender's policy to do so. And then a loan request is not to be declined solely based on inadequacy of collateral. SBA doesn't permit its guarantee to be used as a substitute for available collateral. All right, so for appraisal requirements, and this is for standard 7A only, the all standard 7A loans secured by commercial real property, this is for all standard 7A loans secured by commercial real property, lenders must obtain an appraisal by a state licensed or certified appraiser. For 7A small loans and SBA Express, the lender must obtain an appraisal under the following circumstances. So if a loan finances a transaction involving parties with a close relationship, like an existing owner or family member, or if SBA concludes that it's necessary to evaluate the creditworthiness, or if the lender requires an appraisal for its similarly sized non-SBA guaranteed loans. And then the remaining bullets are the information, are the appraisal requirements, such as that it needs to be dated within 12 months. An appraisal is not required. When it's not required, all lenders must obtain an appropriate evaluation that's consistent with safe and sound banking practices, and that evaluation under the 7A small and SBA Express doesn't need to be state licensed appraiser, but it does need to be consistent with the federal banking regulations. Okay, so this has been a hot topic, one we've talked about quite a bit with individuals and fielded a lot of questions. And that is that when for submission of application for guarantee, lenders must list in E-Tran all beneficial owners of at least 20% of the applicant and at least 51% of the total beneficial owners of the applicant. And beneficial owners is a person who owns a concern directly or indirectly through another entity. And you'll notice that person is capitalized because it's a defined term in the SOP. And so person, as defined in the SOP, is an individual, corporation, partnership, association, unit of government, or legal entity, however organized. And that is a federal regulation 13 CFR 120.10. And lenders must submit the required information from SBA Form 1919 into E-Tran, but they're not required to upload the form into E-Tran. And then lenders need to retain the signed SBA Form 1919 in the loan file. So for the E-Tran terms and conditions, SBA is not requiring signatures on the terms and conditions. For the secondary market, there's been added language to the SOP for the required note terms for loans that will be sold on the secondary market. And then for licenses, lenders must obtain evidence of all licenses required to operate the business. And this is within no more than 90 days after the final disbursement of the loan. But they may not be sold into the secondary market until all required licenses are obtained. This next one is one that Diana brought up at the beginning. So it's right here, and that is the construction loan provision. If the construction component of the 7A loan is 500 or less, it's do what you do. 500,000 or less, it's do what you do. If the construction component of the 7A loan is more than 500,000, in accordance with Regulation 13 CFR Section 120.200, SBA has granted a blanket waiver of the requirement. So there you go, Diana. Little relief.
Yeah, let me just say, remember that until November 15th, you and I are partners in you being lenders and I are partners in this construction waiver. Please, consolidate them where you can. If you've got multiples, feel free to send them all in one email. But until November 15th, we're going to be partners in that waiver. And after that time, we will be going back to the life as you knew it under 5010-6, and that is to be able to get a blanket waiver subject to the terms and conditions in the SOP. So hang in there with me. Try to be as responsive as I can.
And that concludes our presentation. We'll field any questions. Ginger, do you want to do any verbally here, or do we want to just answer them via the chat?
Hopefully we've been hitting the questions as we go along. Whenever we roll out a big new policy change, we're always kind of overrun with questions, so it's kind of difficult to single out particular questions. I know the team has been working hard through the duration of this call to provide private responses as well as public responses. Flipping through here, the 6-month look back, I saw a bunch of questions about that. So let's talk about that for just a moment. In the SOP, in Section A, which is the section that applies to both 7A and 504, we have the requirement for guarantees, personal and corporate. And except for changes of ownership, SBA does apply a 6-month look back. So if you're going to make an SBA loan, whether it's 7A or 504, and let's say it's for equipment, and let's say your borrower 1 week ago had a 25% ownership interest in the business, they know that they're going to be applying for an SBA loan, so they reduce their ownership to 19%. SBA is going to consider that they did that to avoid providing a guarantee. So there is a 6-month look back for loans that are not for changes of ownership. For loans that are change of ownership, there is no look back. And the reason for the look back is there is a regulatory definition at 13 CFR 120.10 of associate. So that is a regulatory requirement. There's just not a 6-month look back for changes of ownership.
Hey, Ginger, I have one that that has nothing to do with this, but we're a lot of questions on that $2,500 fee. Thanks for those 3,000 of you that are still on the line. The $2,500 flat fee is a fee the lender may charge, not other, it's not a packaging fee. It's more like an origination fee. So there still may be third-party vendors. Any third-party vendor has to disclose on a 159 still what those fees are. But if the lender caps their charges to the borrower in terms of origination fee, now that's not out of pockets and things, but if their origination fee, quote unquote, is $2,500, you don't have to do the form, but it does have to be reported. So on your closing statement, you show that you charge that fee, and any other fees that are charged by third parties are still coming in on the 159. If the lender charges more than $2,500 for whatever reason, then yes, you're going to have to do a 159 too. So the flat fee recognizes that there's some out-of-pocket sunk expenses in a deal for a lender, right? And so call it an origination fee, a doc fee, whatever you want to call it. But if it's limited to $2,500, if that's your charge to the borrower directly from the lender, then you don't have to provide a 159, but you do have to disclose all fees charged to a borrower in the obtaining of a 7A loan or a 504 loan. So for that matter, everybody else does the 159. Anything over 2,500 still has to be itemized.
Right. And so if you charge any fees at all, you're going to have to enter that into E-Tran. If it's 2,500 or less, you're not required to enter it using a 159. But if it's more than that, you enter it using a Form 159. Also saw some questions about technology fees. In 5010-7, which is about to be replaced by 5010-7.1, we did allow lenders to pass on technology fees as an out-of-pocket expense, or they had the option of including it in their service and packaging fees. So we are in 5010-7.1 changing that because we do need to know what fees you're charging your borrowers. So you're still allowed to charge a technology fee, but that's going to be included in all of the fees that you're charging the borrowers. So again, if your fees are $2,500 or less, including technology fees, you just enter that into E-Tran. If they're more than that, you enter it into E-Tran using Form 159.
Okay, and for those last 2,900 lucky little wicked folks hanging on the line, let's talk just a minute again about the guarantee substitution. Ross, can you go back to that slide? Let's kind of walk through it again to help people understand that this is new for origination. It's common in servicing that when a borrower sells a business or someone leaves or whatever, that we substitute guarantors. But this is the first time we've had the opportunity for lenders in originating loans to consider third parties that are not required to guarantee the loan to substitute for one of the required guarantors. And one of the questions that were in there is, where's the consideration? Must be coming from a lawyer, because I had the same thought. You can't have a one-sided agreement. There has to be consideration in any agreement like that. So that is part of what you need to consider as a lender, that if you're going to have a different guarantor, do I replace my guarantor or do I just add it, which you guys have always had and have always exercised the opportunity to not only take the guarantee of someone required, but someone who has assets when that person doesn't. So you're familiar with the concept of having my borrower guarantee and then maybe having an additional guarantor. In this case, what we're allowing you to do is substitute that guarantee, but you can see here that there should be an agreement, some kind of transfer or liability agreement that should be submitted to you by the applicant as part of the loan package. So you need to collect that so that we can adequately and correctly identify the substitute guarantor. And of course, when Eddie comes and does his reviews, or Paul Kerwin's team comes out, they're going to look at these kind of instruments to see, did it make sense? We don't think this should be a free-for-all for everybody to charge and say, okay, I don't want to guarantee my loan, get somebody else, because why would anybody guarantee a loan for a third party unless there was some benefit for them? So when somebody offers a third party guarantor and they're not related, it's just common sense and good prudent lending to dive that and make sure that it's a relationship that makes sense, that it makes sense to you and to your team at the lender, whether you're a bank or a non-bank lender, a CA lender, that it makes sense to you in order to proceed. But it is, there are circumstances, I think, as I discussed before, where you have parent and children, trying to support and start new businesses where that does make sense. So hopefully that's a little more clarity on that. Ginger, do you have any comment to add?
No, I do not.
Okay,
Getting a lot of
bad. Go ahead.
Say again?
I was going to say, not even a bad witch joke. Okay.
No, that was all I could Google on the fly.
Okay.
Ones that could be repeated anyway.
Well, I don't know. Does anybody else on the team see a question that we might pop up here while we still have 2,800 attendees? I know everybody wants to get away, but this is really important and exciting, and this is the first look at this. I'm sure everyone hasn't had time to absorb it, but
I think Diana may have mentioned earlier that we understand this is a new topic. We see that you have a lot of questions about it, and we will compile the questions and look at doing a separate recorded training on demand regarding substitute guarantors. But there's not a whole lot more to say about that. It's pretty much what it is. Yeah.
And one of the things we didn't get, there's a lot of questions in here about the compliance codes that they weren't able to take live. So we're going to, kind of divide and conquer these questions, and we'll send them over to the E-Tran team and the Marty's team to try and see if we can provide answers or there were suggestions about, things in E-Tran that might make it easier. So we'll share that information. And I'm not sure how we consolidate or get these FAQ kind of things back out to the public, but we'll work on that. So take the time to have your team go in. The notice will be out this week, and that will give you the highlights of what is in the 7.1 update, because it's largely the same document under the same rules generally that were approved August 1st and delivered. And remember, November 15th is the due date, is the active date on this. Until then, we'll be operating under 5010-7. Make sure your team goes into the on-demand training. Make sure they sign up for, delivery, everybody, your servicers, your processors, so they have access to these kinds of tools that give them answers on the changes. Ginger, Rob?
I think that'll do it. Thank you all for joining us. We will, as Diana just mentioned, be updating the training on demand page. And the new SOP is already posted on SBA's website, available for download. And the information notice will be posted shortly. However, everybody who received the email today from me, you've already received the exact text that will be published in the information notice. So thank you very much. Happy holidays to everyone. Happy Halloween, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks
Thanks
everyone
all
for attending. This concludes the call.